Honourable member for Elmwood, Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it is an honour to rise in what will likely be the last time in this place before it closes for renovations. And I'm very sensitive to the irony of getting up on a time allocation motion for a bill having to do with the Elections Act, of all things, something that in the last Parliament Liberal members were quick to point out should never be done, because the Elections Act is one of the kind of basic instruments of democracy in Canada, and it's important that not only that the Elections Act not favor one group over another within Parliament, but that it not be seen to do that, which is why the process around it is so important and why it's so important to get everybody on board. And we've seen, despite the flowery speech we had from the Prime Minister yesterday in this place about Centre Block and what's happened here, a pattern of disrespect for Parliament. As far as I'm concerned, we think of some of the early indications around Motion 6. We think of the government's treatment of the good work on electoral reform and change that was done through the Special Committee on Electoral Reform that was essentially thrown in the waste bin by the government the day that it was delivered. We think of the super closure motion on the legislation to legislate Canada Post workers back to work, which undermine not just parliamentary democracy, but another form of democracy, which is collective bargaining in the workplace. And I have to say, for a minister who's stressing the nature of the technical amendment that we're making and the fact that all parties supported it at proc in the House of Commons, there's another irony, which is that she's relying on an undemocratic institution, the Senate, to have done that work because the government wouldn't accept that work in the House, in the actual democratic House. So why is it that we have to defend a democratic House in order to get changes to our democratic instruments here in Canada, Mr. Speaker?
Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I need to clarify something from my honourable colleague there, because it was actually the intention of the Procedure and House Affairs Committee to include this, and it was a drafting error. And so it's not that, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee didn't notice this. It's that it was simply a drafting error, and it was something that was brought forward by all members of the committee, including that from the NDP. And of course, I am glad to note as well that the NDP had supported this piece of legislation at third reading in the House. I hope they will do so today, because it is important and it contains elements that both of our parties feel very strongly about, because ultimately this is about Canadians and Canadians' ability and right to cast their ballot, and to ensure that they're doing that in an accessible way. And so I do think that it is extraordinarily important that we get this done. We're talking about a couple of words that will make sure that there is no foreign funding for issue advertising during the writ period, something that we can all get behind. That was the intention of the amendments that were brought forward at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, and it's important that we get this done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.